Welcome to another Open Democracy Tedworth podcast. This is Tony Curzon-Price. This two-part interview with Roger Scruton was recorded on Monday the 10th of February 2014 in London. It's a conversation sparked off by his new novel about Czech dissidents in the early 1980s, Notes from Underground. Part 1 runs for about 15 minutes and Part 2 will run for about 25. Roger, welcome. It's very good to be here.
Thank you for inviting me to talk.
Roger, you have this book coming out, Notes from Underground, which we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about. First question, the title. So there are lots of ways in which it's Notes from Underground. Your character comes up from underground. It's about the Czech samizdat scene, which you knew well. But it's also the title of a rather famous predecessor.
Yes, well, indeed, Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground was, in a way, the first, in my view, the first venture into a new kind of literature in which the first person voice is not that of somebody who has any heroic potential or anything to recommend him, really, apart from the fact that he is beaten down by his own experience into a state of exasperation, and yet somehow, through that very state, being given a kind of inside view of the things around him. And so my hero, or anti-hero in this book, is in many ways similar. He's a young man, a young boy really, who has suffered a very normal catastrophe in that part of the world at that time. This is in the late 1970s, 1980s in Prague, or in Czechoslovakia. That's to say, because of his father's dissident activity, he's lost all right to an education. His father has died in prison. He is totally isolated not just by his grief, but also by the fact that nobody in his immediate circle wants anything to do with him. He has to find some way of living the life that has been, the little bits of life that have been left to him, that will be compatible with his extremely developed intellect, and the fact that he recognises that there's more to him than the world will grant.
Let me come back just for a moment to Dostoevsky, because the underground man in Dostoevsky is aggressively and assertively confronting the meaninglessness of existence.
Yes.
This is a number of your characters, including your underground man, are doing the same thing, but doing it in a rather different and less nihilistic way.
Absolutely. Jan he's a boy. He hasn't got in him that kind of aggression of Dostoevsky's underground man. He'd love to have it, and he sits reading that novel of Dostoevsky in the hope of absorbing it. But of course, he is actually a gentle, defeated person who doesn't see a way out except to travel round on the Prague underground, observing the people there and trying to invent their stories, living a kind of fantasy world.
You're offering a sort of conservative existentialism here. It sounds paradoxical, because obviously we're used to the view from Dostoevsky onwards that existentialism is an assertive, willful, and a process of transformation of the world. What your characters are trying to do is to accept the existentialist view of the prior meaninglessness of modernity, but are trying to rescue something or make an assertive choice for tradition.
Yeah, I would say that it's not so much choosing tradition as recognizing that we are not in a position to create the world anew. We're not in a position to do what the communists wanted, to replace everything with the perfect plan. That we are here in the circumstances that we didn't create, but there is still the possibility, nevertheless, of recognizing the other as more important than yourself, and giving oneself completely to that other, which is what Jan does with Betka, only to discover that she hasn't really given herself completely to him.
What's the relationship, do you think, between your philosophy and your fiction?
Well, I'm of the view that philosophy is, in the end, useless if it doesn't connect with life as we live it, and some ideas are just fascinating in themselves. Of course, the ideas of completeness theorems in formal logic are fascinating, but they're not likely to make the difference between being at home in this world and alienated from it. But there are other ideas which feed into one's sense of what it is to be alive, and transfigure that sense. Give one the ideas which actually don't so much guide one as to make one conscious of what it is one is doing and what it is one is feeling. And I think that's what Patočka did for many of these dissidents with his all that stuff about the solidarity of the shattered. These are ideas which now are sort of fading, as it were, because they don't make immediate contact with how we live.
So just to take a quote from your other very fascinating book, Green Philosophy, it seems to me that the novel is an expansion of this. Certainly in Betka's attitude, you have a very short passage in Green Philosophy on Heidegger. First, to preface it, I don't go along with Heidegger's method, or the outrageous claims, etc. However, Heidegger is important for my argument because he illustrates the centrality of the concepts of home and care in shaping the phenomenology of attachment, and because his otherwise unaccountable popularity is derived almost entirely from this fact. Heidegger's philosophy is a philosophy of settlement, a set of mystical instructions for being at home in a godless world, a liturgical spell for changing solitude and alienation into the comforted fullness of being here and now. This, it seems to me, is Betka's project.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you're right. She's more agreeable than Heidegger in her way of doing it. But, yeah.
And certainly more comprehensible.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I think this relation between literature and philosophy is such an interesting one. I haven't really said quite what I think. When I was first drawn to being a literary person at all, when I was a teenager, for me, philosophy and the novel and poetry, these were all continuous with each other. They were explorations of the human spirit and attempts to make sense of the world, and they had messages, and these were messages for you. That you had to receive those messages like reading a personally addressed letter. And I think I still feel that, and of course there are novels of ideas which become boring because they're overloaded with ideas, or the ideas that are not realised in a character. And likewise, there are works of philosophy which have no concrete details in them at all. And I think one of the challenges for someone like me is to write a novel like this in which which are as it were super saturated with ideas, but the ideas crystallise out as characters, as concrete and believable phenomena in the empirical world, so that you engage with them and you respond to them with love or hatred, as the case may be.
Here's, it seems to me, a good example of Betka's attitude towards the world. She says to Jan, I wanted to show you how to live openly in the space they allowed, how to forget all those imagined secrets and to live for yourself. This is what Betka aims to do. Now, the picture she has of it is, firstly, another phrase you use about her, she has I think you say, a reckless egoism. She's reckless in her assertion of her desire to, as you say, to live her own life.
Yeah.
And it's reckless. Now, in communist Prague, she has a certain amount of space given to her, and she expertly and rather compromisingly finds her way through that space for herself.
Yes, but it's also for others, as you discover.
Yes.
I mean, that she's a complicated character. You know, she is what she is, but her feelings for Jan are totally genuine. She has found this person with whom she completely sympathises, because she sees that he is living in this world of dead ends and looking for the door that will open, and she makes up her mind to open it for him. That's why she says all these things to him, but she knows she can't in the end be what he needs, and he has to be. It's up to him to be that thing, and of course he can't in the end be it, which is one reason why he ends up this curmudgeonly creature in Washington, because he's never found anybody else that would do this for him either.
On Betka's reckless self-regard and her egoism, the compromises that she makes for them, to some extent you celebrate that. To some extent one feels, but this is an irresponsible way to live.
I think what I'm trying to convey in this novel is a very special condition and a special way of life in which everything seems to be a secret. There's a secret attached to everything, and you peel away the secret and you find another one beneath, and that was true of that world. It's what was so extraordinary and frightening about it. And Philip Roth, in his own way, saw it. A lot of people who've written about it saw it. Kafka even predicted it before it happened.
Or saw it in the Austro-Hungarian version, or the Republican version. Yes.
And Betka is a wonderful example of this. That she wants to live fully, but to do so she has to be a secret, to live fully in that particular world, and so she can only ever let a small amount of the information about her come out at once, and yet
she has to be a secret, but she also surely has to compromise herself. This is one of her statements the few moments when she tries to justify herself. Listen, Honza, I'm not against truth, but I need something more useful, which is information. And all of a sudden she turns from being this person seeking truth, authenticity, all these things, but actually behind it she needs something useful.
Yeah, that's true. So that's why she's a complicated character. She has prepared, unlike him, she has seen that this world of this kind of fantasy world that the communists have created, which seems so absolutely immovable and impregnable, as though it's going to last forever. She's seen that it's not going to last forever, and you've got to work for what you will be when the wall falls down, when the whole structure crumbles, and for that, living in truth won't give her what she needs. But what will give her what she needs is information about the world beyond.
That brings to an end part 1 of my conversation with Roger Scruton. His novel, Notes from Underground, is published by Beaufort Books in New York and is available on Amazon and in ebook. You can read an extract on Open Democracy, where you can also find part 2 of this interview.